You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Bitcoin Breakdown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go above and beyond. We look a little bit farther afield, see what's lighting things up over there on the other side of the trading screen, which is, of course, the crypto side. Going to talk the Bitcoin, the ETH, the other altcoin, talking the SKEW, the spot, the volume, the volatility, the OI, all that good stuff, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting, at least we tend to think like that around these parts, Options Insider Radio Network. If I sound a wee bit different, it's because I'm coming at you from the Southern studio today. Got the heck out of Chicago for the first time in nearly a year. So that's exciting in and of itself. So look forward to this coming at you from throughout the week. All you in the Secret Club already had access to our Double Pro Week throughout all of last week. Double Pro Q&As, double options boot camps, live to your ear holes. Double OPRs, also live to your ear holes. And, of course, also available now exclusively for you folks on the Pro Podcast feed. If you guys want to get access to that Pro feed, join us live throughout the week for our shows, as well as everything else we have cooking here, exclusive options oddities, exclusive Pro Q&As. You know where to go, theoptionsinsider.com/secret club. And of course, however you listen live after the fact, all we ask is if you like what you hear, keep rating and reviewing it in your platform of choice. We really are the only show of its kind that's talking about the derivative side of the crypto fence. So if you like it, you want to hear more of it, and you want to have more people join the show, which we are seeing all the time, keep leaving those ratings and reviews. It really does help all the new folks continue to discover the program as we keep on rolling. It is time to break down a little bit of Bitcoin.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, it's that time of week. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all the action in everyone's, well, maybe not your favorite, but the world's leading digital asset, which is, of course, Bitcoin. Coming into showtime, we are seeing it start to test those levels again. Is it going to break the 40K level? We shall see. We are seeing the broad equity markets sell off pretty aggressively and have been doing so for the better part of the last week. Whenever that happens, as many of our guests have said of late, crypto, a bit of a high beta tech allocation. It tends to follow suit, and it is following suit back into the red again at about a 40,400 and change when we kicked off the show. That's pretty much the low for the week right now. And in terms of highs for the week, it came right after our show last week on Tuesday, about 46,000, almost 46,800. So a little bit of dark side there on the old screens this week. Pretty much over a 6,000 point range on the week, about 6,300 points. So quite the range, I should say, on the week. And again, people are a little bit in consternation mode right now. Is it going to break the 40K level again? Are we going to see more projected downside there? Of course, we have seen a lot of exacerbation of tensions. That tends to weigh on everything across the board. The Fed and inflation, a lot of things are weighing on many assets across the board right now. Crypto, no exception to that. Coming into showtime again, we have a little bit of vol, a little more vol really on the screen. Not a ton. We're still looking pretty light in the crypto vol front. By the way, if you want to check out this data, everything else we're talking about here on the show for yourselves, you know where to go. gvol.io is a place to go. Genesis Volatility. We just had Greg, the co-founder of Genesis, on the program last week. Seems like every time we talk to him, they are adding more data, more platforms, more partnerships. They have an investment now from Deribit. That'll certainly help them spin things up over there. So if you want to kick the tires and light the fires for yourselves, gvol.io, gvol.io, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires for all these analytics we're going to talk about today and a whole bunch more. Like I said, a little bit more vol on the screens when we're kicking off the show. Not perhaps as much as you might expect, given what's going on out there in the crypto markets. But then again, crypto is not exactly like an equity. People have been trained on equities where we see a bit of a sell-off, okay, equals more vol, right? Don't see that in the crypto space for a number of reasons. First off, the equity skew is very different than what we see in crypto. In equity, the skew is primarily to the downside. So when we move down, vol tends to go up. That's what happens when you move down a skew curve like that. Crypto, not so much. Usually the bid is to the calls. These days, the calls and puts have been hanging out around equal levels, which is somewhat interesting in and of itself. But that also means on a bit of a sell-off, you're not going to see perhaps the vol spike that you might expect in some other asset classes. And that's pretty much the case right now. A 62 vol right now. In Bitcoin, it was a 59 on our last show. So ticking up ever so slightly. Now, of course, if we continue to see this downside in the crypto space, we will see those puts come to life, and there will be a little bit more vol creeping onto the screens. But for right now, we're still kind of hanging out right around that low 60 level, which, if you know anything about vol, you know it isn't that volatile, really. We've seen a lot of assets that are much more volatile than that. You know, Nat Gas, some tech names out there, your meme stocks, usually much more volatile than a low 60s. So Bitcoin kind of relaxing right now, even though they have that great commercial. Who is it? Intuit, I think they have it, where the guy's a crypto millionaire. Oh, then he's not. Then he's a crypto millionaire again. And it's for doing your taxes, but it was a kind of a fun commercial, and it kind of plays on that perception everyone has that crypto still insanely volatile. Right now, at least, Bitcoin, not so much. BitVol showing a little bit more vol on the screen as well. Remember, BitVol is effectively that 30-day implied vol measure created by our friend Mr. Simon Ho, also the creator of Spikes. So it's kind of loosely called the Bitcoin VIX. It's at about a 66 right now, ticking up about 3.5 points from where it was this time last week. SKEW-wise, a little bit more action to the dark side this week, as you probably would expect. Last week, the SKEW, I should say, was slightly bearish. It was about a -2, so it showed the action was on the put wing, but not a ton. This week, getting a little bit more action to the dark side. Almost a -6 when we kicked off the show, about -5.6. So that is showing there is more action, more interest on the SKEW wing, which, if we continue to test these lows, you would expect. The bit skew, which again is Simon's measure of the overall skew out there, reflecting something similar as well. At about a 98 when we kicked off the show, up slightly. It was a 96.5 on our last show. So still not earth-shaking numbers, but we'll see if this sell-off continues. We will see a little bit more life spring into those puts. Let's see what's springing in over there on Deribit from an overall open interest perspective. And we got pretty much a little bit more across the board is the answer to that. We've got 111,000 calls open on Deribit right now. It's up 6,000 from this time last week. Puts, 55,000. It's up about 5,000. So calls and puts kind of increasing in equal numbers out there, even if calls are still pretty much 2-to-1 over puts from an OI perspective. Again, if we continue to threaten these downside levels, it'll be interesting to see if those puts can start to catch up. That's usually what it seems to take to really get the puts to catch fire is protracted downside. Then we start seeing that OI start to climb. And then it gets a little bit interesting out there from a SKEW perspective. Let's see what's interesting right now from an overall OI perspective. Where are you folks lining up? It seems like quarterlies have been dominating the race. That continues to be the case this week. Right now in Bitcoin, June is the dominant player with 50,000 contracts, pretty much exactly. It's up about 2,500 contracts from this time last week, even though April catching up. June better start looking in the rearview mirror. 40,000 contracts open in April. That's up 6,000 from this time last week. And that's not entirely surprising, given what's going on right now, how much these markets are moving around a little bit. People want to play a little bit closer to fire. They don't want to go all the way out to the next quarterly. They want to play in the front month. So not surprising that April getting a little bit of action. And then September, the next farthest out quarterly, bringing up the rear with 22,000 contracts, up about 1,000. Nobody's really playing in September right now. They want all the action in the front portion of that curve. Let's see where you folks are lining up from a top options perspective right now. What are the size positions in Bitcoin options? Let's find out, shall we? Number 5, the 30,000 strike. That has 8,000 contracts. That's up about 900 from this time last week. So a little bit more paper on the 30K strike. Who knows? If this continues, we could be down there in the not-so-distant future. I don't want to scare all the bulls out there. Just throwing it out there. Number 4, the 80,000 strike. That's quite the chasm yet again between number 5 and number 4. We jump up 50,000 points to the 80,000 strike. That has 9,300 contracts open. That's up about 1,500 from this time last week. Number 3, the 70,000 strikes are still hanging out on those, shall we say, optimistic strikes with 10,000 contracts open. That's unched from this time last week, so no real change there. Number 2, the 50K strike has 13,000 contracts open, also unched from this time last week. So not a lot of new paper on the far upside strikes. And let's see what the number 1 is this week. It is the 60,000 strike yet again. That has 13,000 contracts open. It's actually down 1,000 from this time last week. So the far out of the money strikes are still kind of dominating the top 5, but not a lot of change there over the course of this week. And again, I say far out of the money, but nowhere near as far as it was when we looked back in December when we saw the par 150, 200,000 strike dominating the tape out there. Speaking of dominating the tape, let's see, how active was that tape over the course of the past week? Let's see what the biggest day was on Deribit from an overall volume perspective. It was the 6th, so midway between our shows this time last week. April 6th did about 16,000 contracts. That's not a ton, so it hasn't been the most active week out there either. On our last few shows, we're usually talking about 23, 24, 25,000 contracts. So to have the biggest day over the past week be 16,000 contracts, that's not a heck of a lot of paper to light things up. So again, maybe some of this protracted downside creep not driving the paper out there that perhaps some folks would have liked to have seen. Let's see what's going on over there on the CME front. Remember, some new products entering that family since over the course of the last couple of weeks. So intriguing stuff to parse there. Let's start with the Bitcoin options. Not a lot of folks playing in the big dog Bitcoin options right now. We saw a whopping 6 go up on Friday. And the OI is unched at 1,400. So not a lot of players overall in the big dog as well. Let's see if that's the same case in the futures, and a little bit more paper going up in the futures. They had kind of been languishing for a while, so a little bit more action on the futures side. Again, these are still the big 5x multiplier contracts, so that's a pretty beefy contract. Getting a little bit cheaper now that Bitcoin has sold off a bit. The OI also ticking up about 5,000 contracts to 16,000. So the futures come to life a little bit. The big options, not so much. Let's talk about the micro stuff. That's where people are interested. Micro Bitcoin futures over there at CME. Let's see, about 15,000 going up on Friday. That OI ticking down a bit, though, ticking down about 7,000 to about 16,000 open on the micro Bitcoin futures out there. That's almost 16,800 to be precise out there. So a little bit of action. We have a question coming in here from Park. Park wants to know, what are your thoughts on the launch of micro Bitcoin options so far? Well, funny you should ask that, Park, because it's been interesting to watch. It's kind of hard to get concrete numbers on these right now because not a lot of the platforms that we use to monitor these have seen these quotes start propagating through. If you've been listening, listeners, you know that these micro Bitcoin and micro Ether options launched back on March 28th. So we got a couple of weeks under our belt now. And looking at this official release, this just came out from CME last week on the 6th. So that same day that was pretty active. They came out and said in the first week of trading, they have seen about 20,000 contracts trading in both micro Bitcoin and micro Ether options. So they're combining the two, obviously, with on-screen activity across different regions and expiration. So that's interesting. They're also saying the ADV out there is about 4,000. So that's not bad. 4,000 contracts a day. They had the OI of about 20,000 at this time last week. Now they're talking just the options there. They're not talking the future. My first thought when I saw that was, they're adding the futures in there as well. But so that's a decent clip for the options. I do want to wait and see for these numbers to start trickling through our other platforms a little bit so I can sink my teeth into them a little bit more, Park. But it seems like the early days folks are playing with them. Again, none of these products over the last couple of weeks have been gangbusters at CME. It's kind of just been a quiet period. So we'll see. Maybe a little bit of this downtick will tick up the vol a little bit and get some more people playing out there. I actually like to turn that question back to you, Park, and to a lot of our listeners. Have you folks been playing with these products right now? Are you intrigued? In fact, we have a poll about that right now over there at Options on Twitter is the place to find this poll, listeners. We asked you folks just about an hour or so ago. We said we've seen quite a few new products hit the options market recently. Which one are you most excited about? Gave you 4 choices. Been some new vol products, so we asked you the SVIX, which is the inverse VIX product. And if you don't understand that, check out our Volatility Views program, listeners. Right behind that, we have the UVIX, which is the 2X long VIX. That's a levered VIX product. And then right behind that, we have micro Bitcoin and ETH options from the CME. You had to kind of lump them together because Twitter only gives you 4 choices for a poll. And right behind that, we have the nanos on SPX from the CBOE. Those are the new no multiplier options just launched by the CBOE last month as well. So it's been a interesting time on the new products front, but intriguing enough for this show right now. This poll is only about an hour or so old. We have the rest of the week for these numbers to start adding up. But so far in the early blush, the early voting on this poll, the micro Bitcoin and ETH options are taking it with exactly 50% of the vote, followed by number 2, 37.5% for UVIX, which is the double long VIX product, and only 12.5% for the inverse VIX product, which is SVIX. No joy for the nanos out there, listeners. We'll see if that remains the case. But intriguing stuff. Again, you guys can play along with that poll. At Options on Twitter is the place to go. Meanwhile, we have to go on into our next segment. It is time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the altcoin universe, a portion of the show where we explore everything outside of the big dog, which is Bitcoin, except for right now when we break down the top 10 in market cap. Now, I said things have been selling off for a wee bit out there, so going to see these numbers and these market caps a little bit lower than it was this time last week. Avalanche, though, managing to still cling to the number 10 spot in the top 10 there, even is a little bit lower this week. Avalanche coming into Showtime at about $20.33 billion worth of market cap. Still good for number 10 on our list. Number 9, it is good old Luna, $30.6 billion worth of market cap. Number 8, Cardano. And this one's been on a journey, so has the number 7 one. We'll get to that in a second as well. Cardano coming into Showtime, 31, almost $32 billion worth of market cap, exceeded ever so slightly by Solana, another one that's been moving all over the place. It was in the 80s a couple of weeks ago, got well into the 100s, now back kind of splitting the uprights at 102 when we kicked off the show, at about $33.5 billion worth of market cap. So Solana and Cardano kind of fighting for those number 8 and number 7 spots, respectively. Number 6, we got XRP holding out still there at $34 billion worth of market cap. XRP is kind of within spitting distance of those two as well. So those three could easily swap spots throughout the week. Number 5, USD coin, almost 51 billion. Number 4, good old BNB at about 66 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, hanging out there, 82.5 billion. Numero due, it's ETH, 362, almost 363 billion. And number 1, the big dog, a wee bit lighter this week, 774 billion worth of market cap for Bitcoin. Let's get out to the number 2 in market cap, number 1 in a lot of your hearts. That is ETH. When we kicked off the show, this one also kind of hanging on the precipice. Bitcoin is hanging at that 40K precipice. Will it break it? ETH doing the same thing, hanging out right around that 3,000 level, listeners. Will it break it? We shall see. And we kicked off the show, it was at 3,020, so just a tick above. It got down, looks like down about 3,005 earlier in today's session for bouncing a bit. So at least so far, for right now, not breaking the 3K level. The high was last Tuesday, again, after our last show, 35.27. So ETH was on quite the tear for a while there, listeners. Now giving up some of that ghost. Coming into showtime, ETH vol, similar story to Bitcoin vol, ticking up ever so slightly, up about 3 points from last week's show. Last week, we were at about a 68. Coming into today's show, at about a 71. SKEW-wise, actually surprising on the SKEW front. Not quite turning as aggressively bearish as we saw in Bitcoin. It was pretty much hanging out there last week, and it's still hanging out there this week. Last week, it was negative 3.7. Coming into today's show, about negative 3.3. So we started off from a more put-driven perspective, I should say, here, and the SKEW last week on the show, and it hasn't really changed much over the course of this week. Actually got a little bit lighter, which is kind of interesting. So that's not what I expected from an ETH SKEW perspective. Let's see what we got going on here from an overall OI perspective. Maybe this will explain it a little bit as well, because coming into showtime right now, over there on Deribit, we have 1.07 million contracts open. It's up about 70,000 from this time last week. The puts, 621,000, also up about 71,000. So calls and puts both adding equal numbers over the course of the past week, which takes a bit of doing to have puts even in the conversation with calls out there. Obviously, overall net OI-wise, calls still leading the dance, but puts are starting to catch up in ETH. So that's perhaps indicative of the sentiment out there in ETH land right now as we're hanging on this 3,000 precipice. In terms of action, we actually saw a little bit of paper going up over the course of the past week, even though not a ton out there. We saw like about 25 million worth of notional, which again, I don't like quoting notional for you folks. Let's get the contract numbers out here. That's better. There we go. Let's go back out to Genesis Volatility, pull up the contract numbers. So the big day for contracts on Deribit was the 8th with 125,000 overall individual prints and then 43,000 in the block prints. You're talking 168,000 contracts. That may sound like a lot, but we've seen multiple days over 200,000 contracts not too long ago in ETH. So $1.68, not exactly lighting the world on fire, which again is kind of similar to what we're seeing out there in ETH right now, or excuse me, in Bitcoin right now. Everyone's kind of waiting and seeing, keeping their powder dry a little bit. Maybe if you start breaking some more of these psychologically important levels, 40,000 in Bitcoin, 3,000 in ETH, that might drive a little bit more paper. We shall see. In terms of expiration, where you folks lining up from an expiration perspective, looks very similar to Bitcoin right now. June, 517,000 contracts open. It's up 23,000 from this time last week. April right behind it, so that front-dated contract starting to loom in the rearview mirror of June here as well. 341,000 contracts open in April. That's up 42,000 from this time last week. So for the biggest gainer of the week is definitely April. And then distant number 3 is September. About 250,000 contracts open there. That's up about 17,000 from this time last week. Let's go find what the big positions are this week out here in ETH options on Deribit. Number 5, it is the 3,000 strike. That's a newcomer to the top 5. That has 83,000 contracts open. So that's kind of interesting to see the 3,000 strike back in our top 5. Number 4, we have the 20,000 strike. So just like Bitcoin, jumping an enormous distance from number 5 to number 4. This time, we're going from the 3,000 strike to the 20,000 strike. That has, in case you're wondering, listeners, that has a whopping 99. Otherwise, the 3,000 strike had 83,000 contracts open. The 20,000 strike has 99,000 contracts open. So that's unched from this time last week. So no change on the 20,000 strike, which I wouldn't expect it to be the big one, but you never know when it comes to ETH. Number 3, the 10,000 strike, also a fairly out of the money strike. has 100,000 contracts. Now, that one has gained 13,000 contracts. So you never know, it's going to be lighting it up this week in ETH. Number 2 is the 5,000 strike, a little bit closer to home. That has 116,000 contracts open. It's up about 6,000 from this time last week. And the big dog in ETH options right now, it is the 4,000 strike, which, again, still remains out of the money. So we shall see right now. 119,000 contracts open. That's down about 10,000 from this time last week. So maybe some folks saw as we raced up to 3,500, maybe we're going to break that strike. When that didn't happen, maybe they were taking some off. Either way, intriguing that the 4,000 strike still dominating the positioning out here from an ETH options perspective. Let's get on out to the CME front. ETH futures, not exactly blowing the doors off. The big contracts out there, 4,200 contracts going up on Friday. That OI ticking up about 100 to 3,600 from this time last week. So not a ton of paper there. Micro ETH futures, again, these are kind of some of the newer additions to the platform. We saw 12, almost 13,000 going up on last Friday, and that OI actually ticking down about 6,000 contracts to 20,000 over the course of this past week. So interesting stuff out there. We just talked about the overall micro ETH options. They lump them together. If you lump them together with Bitcoin, then they're averaging about 4,000 a day. I'll need to dig in a little bit more to see if I can pull out the numbers for micro ETH by themselves. Again, so far, it looks like aggregate they're doing decent numbers for a new product. We need to wait and see, I think, a little bit more before we can make any determinations one way or the other. I do know CME wouldn't have launched the options on a future that's only a few months old if they weren't pretty optimistic about the chances for this thing catching fire. And given the number of you who've written into us on the retail front saying, hey, I would love a more bite-sized product to trade, these 5x and above multiplier contracts are just beyond my capacity to trade. We get it. CME gets it. So hopefully we'll see some more paper flocking into those. If our poll is any indication, they're certainly lighting up your radar right now, which is certainly interesting. Let's see what else is lighting it up out there. Again, it's mostly dark side on the board for the rest of the major altcoin. XRP coming into showtime a little bit north of 70 cents, about 70.6. That puts it down almost a dime, actually a little over a dime, almost 11 cents. It was about 81.5 cents on last week's show. That puts it down almost 11 cents over the course of the past week. So XRP, not feeling that love. Will we ever get a resolution to this? Who knows? It seemed like it's been imminent for quite some time. So I'm not holding my breath much anymore. When we get it, that'll be finally interesting that we can finally maybe trade this or have at least some certainty one way or the other. For now, still playing the wait and see game out there. Dogecoin actually kind of bucking the trend, only off about a little less than half a cent. So that's compared to the rest of the altcoin out there, it's not the worst. A Litecoin selling off last show 122 and about a quarter. This show 104.70, off about 17, almost 17 and a half handles. So a big drubbing for altcoin. Cardano, same deal. Last show, 117. This week, 95 cents, down 21, almost 22 cents. Polkadot, you heard Greg talking about Polkadot on the show recently. That was kind of interesting. Polkadot taking a bit of a break as well. 21.87 on our last show, 17.75 this week, down a little over $4, about $4.12. Solana, wow, just a big drop here. It was 128.31 on our last show, 102.67. Coming into today's show, down 25 handles again. So Solana, as it is wont to do, moving quite a bit. Where do you fall on the Solana ETH debate? Seems like there are proponents on both sides out there. Or you may be playing both sides. Are you straddling the fence and picking up both? Hit us up, let us know. I'd be curious what you folks think. And a Shiba Inu, all you folks hanging out there waiting for the Shiba Lambos. It was 0.000026 on our last show, down to 0.000023 this show. So unfortunately, no Shiba Lambos this week either. And that's going to do it for this Just the Facts edition of the Crypto Rundown. Listeners, remember, I'm in the Southern studio this week, so all you folks in the Secret Club, hopefully you enjoyed the double pro week that came at you fast and furious last week. If you missed anything, check it out on the Pro podcast feed for you folks, double pro Q&As with Greg, the founder of Genesis Volatility. He answered a lot of your questions about crypto vol and SKEW last week, as well as, of course, the Viceroy himself. Always a fun one to have in the hot seat. So double pro Q&As. Also, we'll have for you folks already there in the Pro podcast feed. You got the second episode of Options Bootcamp. The rest of you have to wait until Wednesday when that hits the network. You also received early the second episode of Options Playbook Radio, the live huddle that we did, Brian and I, last week as well. The rest of you will have to wait till Wednesday to hear that on demand on the network. Then I'll be back live on Thursday with This Week in Futures Options, which we will talk about some crypto there probably, as well as, of course, episode 2 of the Option Block. Friday, markets are closed. Don't come at me. I didn't close them. And then we're back again in the studio next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Be safe out there, everybody.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.